So every state has a different set of rules, and then there's the federal U.S. Now, Washington State, for instance, doesn't have a state tax return, so you don't get stuck. You can go in and out of Washington State all year round. You don't have to. But you can get stuck with something else, which is their total business tax. So Washington State doesn't have a state tax return, but they do have a business tax based upon a percentage of your gross income.
Percentage of business done in Washington State relative to your total gross
You got it.
income, right?
So you have to break it out, and you're more likely to get caught. Strangely enough, you're more likely to get caught by Washington State than you are by New York State. There's a reason for it. New York State could only get taxed if there's a profit because they're taxing the company on profits
Right.
based upon how many pickups.
Washington is on gross revenues?
Washington's on gross revenues. So anytime they track anybody they track down, they get something.
Oh.
Everybody they find, they get something.
Yeah. How
Whereas,
aggressive are they at pursuing that?
oh, really aggressive. My November 1996 newsletter has a story about somebody in BC being attacked by the.
Because I see trucks rolling down 99 going across the line all the time, right?
Oh yeah, well you think about all the paperwork they're filling out for their loads in their every truck stop
Absolutely.
and going through the border and so on. It's just one more little set. It's also well documented that it's easy for the tax authorities to get at them, and it's the same kind of thing we're talking about. If you've got an IRA and you move it, it's a well-documented move. If you've got $1 million in the bank account, and you go and get your $1 million out and take it to another bank account, another bank, another state, nobody pays any attention.
Right.
Although you might have a report that somebody thinks it's suspicious, so they report it as a suspicious transaction. But if you've got $1,000 in your IRA, and you do it, it gets like 10 times more reporting than the $1 million does.
Absolutely.
So IRAs, RSPs, and all the rest of that stuff.
It's well documented, as what you're saying is that people think that they're fooling the IRS or the CRA in Canada by...
Or the Securities Commission.
Or the commissions, by either fibbing about your address or not sort of, as an advisor, not recording your client's proper address.
So this is a tough one, yes.
Okay. Yeah, sorry?
I'm going to make an assumption that you would not knowingly deal with somebody at a wrong address because you know this stuff so well. But at least once a week I run into somebody who has an account at their sister's house dealing with a broker someplace.
Yeah.
And they tell me the broker knows. I say, well, this is all the broker knows.
Yeah. Well, it's incumbent upon the broker to correctly record the address, for the client, number one, for the client to supply the correct information, right, obviously. And number two, the broker has to document the account properly, and it should be updated regularly as required by compliance regulations and so forth. And if it's a non-resident account, it has to be declared, right? For a variety of reasons, whether they're regulatory or tax.
So if I'm a stockbroker with a company, and let's put it this way, if I'm a stockbroker with a company, and I knowingly set up a company, we'll call it ABC Securities, and I have a client with $1 million who's moved to the States, and the client says, it's all right, I'm going to use my brother's address. And I keep on using the brother's address. What sort of penalties can I incur, and what can the company incur?
Well, it depends on which jurisdiction. For example...
Let's try BC.
A good example is we have had... Well, here's a couple of... I'll give you a real-life example here. Recently, a colleague of mine, an investment management professional, a firm such as ours, based out of Manitoba, had a single account in Alberta. The Alberta Securities Commission, this is a true story, for whatever reason, I don't know how they found out about it, but the fine for the money manager was...
This is the Manitoba money manager.
This is in Canada. This isn't necessarily cross-border.
No, but it's cross-border. It's cross Alberta.
Cross Alberta, Manitoba. The fine in that singular incident was $39,000 for that single incident to the advisor, and the requirement to register, pay fees, and so forth, and penalties, and $39,000 just for that one incident, plus investigation costs, I believe. So that's one incident. I've seen here cases in the province of BC where Ontario firms in Canada, large ones too, and it goes to this UBS issue, firms large enough that should know better, know that they should be registered in the jurisdiction where they're going to provide service. Where the BC Securities Commission, this is a recent case in the last year, where they the commission fined, no, it wasn't 100,000, but it was 60 or 70,000, I think, for that particular incident.
So let's pretend you're ABC company,
Right.
and you got 50 brokers, and that one over there, George or John or...
Well, let me just
go
back
to-
this up
yeah.
here a little bit in terms of clarifying the regulatory environment in Canada. Stockbrokers, investment advisors that work for bank-owned and brokers and wealth advisors and the like are typically nationally registered, and they are registered through the Investment Dealers Association. Let's take an example, Nesbitt Burns for lack,
Sure.
they're all the same. But basically, a Nesbitt Burns will register in all provinces,
Yeah.
and will have their brokers registered in all the provinces where they have clients. And they have a fairly strict compliance regime, certainly when I worked with them. And a reputable company like Dominion Securities, same thing. They will license you if you're a broker resident in Ontario and you're going to do business with a client in BC. And before they'll sign off, your branch manager or compliance department will sign off on that, you have to be registered in British Columbia has to be added to your docket.
Okay.
And the fees have to be paid and so forth. Most firms run a fairly rigorous compliance campaign in Canada, for interprovincial
Yep.
registrations and so forth. What we find is that they don't maintain the same diligence when it applies to the United States in some cases, but more so from the Canadian side into the United States, less so from Americans, advisory firms providing service into Canada. Did that make sense in terms
Well,
of?
I think I got what you're saying is that the Canadian government, the Canadians spend more time going after people who do interprovincial stuff than people that are doing
Right.
south of the border. So if Canada found out that you were dealing with somebody down in Los Angeles, they might not make a big fuss about it.
Well, it's like this thing, it's never a problem until it's a problem. For example, how does the BC, just for an example, let's take the British Columbia Securities Commission, just simply because we reside in the province as an example. Until they find out that there's an advisor advising within this jurisdiction that's unregistered, they have no knowledge to go after it, right? So they have to either be tipped off by somebody, either there has to be a complaint, or a random investigation, but somehow they have to be notified or figure out that somebody's dealing in
Well, I
province
think there's a
unregistered.
lot of them happening right now because people are. I had 2 people today who have non-BC addresses who've lost a couple of $100,000 and are mad at their brokers, and they were dealing with people illegally. And
Well, that's the problem. I mean, the other thing is, and this is a question I'm not sure whether it's been tested, but here's the issue. You are a client and you've been dealing with somebody that's unregistered in your jurisdiction. You have an issue, right or wrong. For example, you may claim that the broker misguided you and are looking for compensation. You may be right or wrong. I mean, maybe it was the broker's fault, maybe it wasn't. But if you pursue it and you as a client phoned the company and said, you know what, I have a complaint and so forth, I can tell you one thing, when the compliance department of the firm that the broker
is
works
licensed
for
with, yeah.
finds out that that particular advisor was operating in the jurisdiction unlicensed, then I can I can imagine that the compensation issue would be fixed up real fast.
Real fast.
Why? Because the fines they make and a quitclaim letter saying, here's whatever you want,
Yeah.
don't say anything, and you sign here as long as we take care of you, because we would rather not have this public.